Thank you for joining our AMR CoP session. And today's theme is strengthening the quality of AMR diagnostics in Africa. Welcome once again. I'm your host today, and my name is Edwin Shumba. We have interpretation services available from English to French. There is a globe icon on your screen. If you can click that to select the language of choice so that you can enjoy this CoP session we have today. To introduce this session today, as some of us may know that the Fleming Fund is supporting some AMR work that ASLM is doing. And we have one of our projects that focuses on external quality assessment, commonly known the EQuAFRICA grant. In that grant, ASLM, together with its partners, are working to strengthen the quality of AMR diagnostics across the continent. Under that initiative, one key activity we have seeks to increase the coverage and uptake of external quality assessment programs for AMR in national reference laboratories, as well as surveillance sites. So today we have this 1-hour session where we will discuss first ASLM's approach to establishing regional EQA centers. And secondly, we want to share the achievements and lessons learned from the implementation of the regional EQA program for AMR. To help us do this today, we have two presenters. So I'm going to introduce the first presenter, who is Beatrice van der Poel, a program lead with ASLM. She is a seasoned laboratory scientist and has over 20 years working experience in laboratory system strengthening initiatives. Currently, Beatrice leads the Fleming Fund Regional EQA Grant for Africa at ASLM. Beatrice, please take it away as you take us through your presentation, which talks about the ASLM's approach to establishing the EQA, regional EQA centers. Over to you, Beatrice.
I'm going to move straight into my presentation, as Edwin has already done a good job of introducing me. And this morning, my job is to talk to you about how ASLM and our consortium partners approached the establishment of EQA providers on the continent, and how we also went about establishing an EQA program for AMR. So Edwin has already given an introduction about the Fleming Fund, but I'll just do a brief job and just give you a background to say the Fleming Fund is a UK aid program and to the value of 265 million. And the objective is to help low and middle income countries to generate, share, and use antimicrobial resistance data. And this is all to respond to the United Nations Interagency Coordination Group Framework for Action on AMR. And as we all know and have been discussing over the years, AMR is really a global issue at the moment, and we actually call it the second pandemic. We've all been focusing on COVID, but AMR is really something that we also need to pay really attention to. So under the Fleming Fund, we have different grants which are working within the countries and at the regional level to implement various programs which aim at really strengthening the quality of the data that we're getting on AMR, so that can really feed into national, regional, and global action plans. So we have the country grants, we have the professional fellowship schemes, and then we have the regional grants. The Regional External Quality Assessment Grant from Africa obviously falls within the regional grant. And the main aim of that program is to strengthen the quality of AMR diagnostics in national reference laboratories and also in surveillance sites. And one of the key activities there is to strengthen the coverage and participation in EQA for AST, and for pathogen identification and for AST. So at the beginning of this grant, to work towards that objective, when we started our activities, the first thing that we needed to understand was what currently was the scope, the coverage, and uptake of EQA programs across the continent. And to do that, we worked with our consortium partners, Public Health England, and also our technical partner, Datus, to do a desk review and a landscape analysis of EQA coverage, uptake, and participation across the continent. And we looked at it from both the perspective of participants, so labs who are participating in EQA, and also from the provider level, is, for actual providers that we currently have on the continent, and perhaps also potential providers. And the findings, there were a lot of findings, but I just wanted to highlight the key ones which speak to why we chose to move ahead and say we need to actually establish regionally owned EQA programs. From the participants' surveys that we did, one of the key things, in fact, one of the top 2 reasons why they did not participate, the labs indicated that they did not either participate or were not participating consistently in EQA programs, was the issue of cost. So for a lot of labs, the cost of participating in EQA programs was prohibitive, especially if you, number one, you look at the financial constraints in labs generally in Africa. And number 2, especially if you are also participating in international EQA programs. Then secondly was that aspect of some kind of provision of technical support from the EQA providers. And oftentimes, although we know that this is not the primary role and responsibility of an EQA provider, one of the things that came out of our surveys was that need for some kind of guidance and technical support to ensure that we were not just participating, but we were actually improving performance. And that was something that was also lacking. From the provider perspective, again, there were many reasons, but the key ones here were the knowledge and skill of how to go about establishing a program. Infrastructure capacity was a very big issue, a very big barrier, and also viability and sustainability. To run an EQA program costs money. And, how are you able to run a program which will be sustainable in the long term? If we look at the participant feedback and the issues that came up about cost of EQA programs, how do you then have a regional program with a sustainable cost model? And so that was an issue. Those were the issues that came out strongly. So in our approach and our strategies, we wanted to see how we can deal with this. And the main thing that came out is that to address these issues required us to have regionally established and owned EQA programs. So in our 3-step strategy to the implementation of the EQuAFRICA grant, step 1 was to ensure the coverage of EQA for AMR under One Health. As you know, this EQuAFRICA and the Fleming Fund is focused on AMR. So we're using AMR as our starting point to be able to establish these regional providers. So for the step 1, to ensure coverage of EQA under AMR, we had some main activities that we wanted to undertake. Could I please ask, there seems to be somebody who is scribbling, maybe using the notation button. So please, could I ask the facilitators if they could, number 1, remove it, and also number 2, maybe disable the participants from being able to do that. Thank you. Let me see. Okay, so I'll disable annotation for others. Okay, then please give me a moment to remove the annotations that are there. Thank you. Okay. So I'll just move on whilst it's not too bad. So hopefully one of my other facilitators can help me to be able to remove the annotations from the screen. But I'll move on with the presentation. My apologies for that. So in terms of establishing the regional EQA providers, number one, we wanted to strengthen whatever existing regional capacity that we had. And through our interactions, our surveys, we know that NICD is number one, was part of our consortium, but NICD was also one of a very few providers on the continent, number one, but also one of a handful of providers who were actually offering EQA for AMR. And so strengthen their existing capacity. But apart from that, we wanted to expand that capacity with the establishment of new providers, because we wanted to expand the pool of providers across the continent to provide high quality EQA panels covering GLAS and FAO priority pathogens. Finally, we also wanted to address the issue of viability and sustainability by ensuring that in the establishment of these programs and of the EQA providers, we worked with them to develop business plans that they could implement over time from the short to the medium term to the long term to ensure that there was sustainability in the long term. And in terms of the program that we wanted to establish, if you look on the screen at the diagram in front of you, you will notice that it's not very different to the WHO recommended establishment of an EQA program. And we will provide these slides for you so you can take your time to look at them. But the structure of the program that we wanted to establish was in line with what is globally recommended. What I would say were the key areas, excuse me, let me just remove this annotation. I'm finding it very difficult to go on with the presentation with that. Okay. Thank you for your patience. So what you will notice in terms of what is unique about the EQuAFRICA program is that we have other areas and other, maybe I would say, support systems for this EQA program. So we have obviously a program steering committee, which is very common to any EQA program, but we also had an expert technical panel as part of that program steering committee, who will provide guidance, support, technical assistance to the EQA providers. And then we had our community of practice, which is key to providing that technical assistance and support to participating sites. And that is the reason, one of the reasons why we're all here today with this AMR CoP. That is what it was established to also help to achieve. And then also, we wanted to develop an informatics system that can be used not only for the operation of the EQA for AMR program, but for any AMR program, any EQA program moving forward. The program steering committee, if I go through that very quickly, is made up of our consortium partners. So we have permanent members and we have ad hoc members. Our permanent members for that EQA, the steering committee, the program steering committee, our consortium partners, plus OIE, WHO, AFRO, and FAO. And that is because one of the key aspects of the Fleming Fund grants is that we have a One Health approach, which means that all our activities not only focus on human health labs, but also incorporate animal health and food safety environmental labs as well. So in line with that One Health approach, these organizations, OIE and FAO, are also part of our consortium and actually sit on our advisory group as well as part of the PSC. We also have ad hoc members, and I've put 3 there. So we have AMREF Health Africa and Institut Pasteur Dakar, and you'll see why they are there as I move on with the presentation. And then other partners like CLSI, etc., who really are key in terms of standards and knowledge around EQA and general laboratory systems in general. So once we had established our strategy, we had put in place what we wanted for the structure of the program, and we had also looked at the establishment of the program steering committee, then we needed to go ahead and actually start doing the work, which was number one, to identify who these providers were going to be. So one of the key things was to ensure that in the establishment of these programs, geographically, we were covering the majority of sub-Saharan Africa. So 9 centers of excellence were selected across the board from Eastern, Central and Western and Southern Africa to be assessed. And the initial criteria was based on whether those sites could have the capacity to implement EQA programs. So once those sites have been selected, we took a checklist, a WHO checklist, which looked at the establishment of EQA programs and the requirements for the establishment of EQA programs, and is a very comprehensive checklist that looks at all the criteria from human resources to infrastructure to quality management systems, really across board in terms of what is needed to establish an EQA program. And at the beginning of January 2020, we did an assessment of all these 9 sites across the countries that you can see on the screen. And out of those, we selected Institut Pasteur Dakar and AMREF Health Africa to move forward with, to join NICD to be established as EQA providers. The selection criteria was based on various things and not necessarily just on the basis of whether the facility had the necessary human capacity, resource capacity, or knowledge and skill, or infrastructure to establish the EQA program, but we also looked at other factors like geographical coverage. We wanted to make sure, as I said earlier, that we were covering the majority of sub-Saharan Africa, and also language. A lot of West and Central Africa, the majority are Francophone versus Eastern and Southern Africa, where we have a lot of English-speaking countries. So we wanted to make sure that we can cover everybody adequately. So out of those assessments, Institut Pasteur Dakar and AMREF Health were selected. Then we had to do the work in terms of capacity building. So those assessments, as I said, were very comprehensive. So we were able to use the outcomes of the assessment to move forward and to look at what we needed to do to build the capacity of these institutions, to strengthen the capacity of NICD, an existing provider, and to build the capacity of AMREF Health and IPD to become providers in themselves. So we looked at workforce, we looked at infrastructure, and we looked at systems, and we used the outcomes of those assessments to really inform individualized work plans for each of those providers. And up to now, we're still providing ongoing technical support, mentorship and supervision from our consortium partners and also from subject matter experts on the ground to help the EQA providers to establish their systems. In terms of the training and capacity building, there's a lot that was done. There wasn't really, when we started, we were looking at how do you train a lab to become an EQA provider? How do you train an institution to become an EQA provider? And through the process of figuring out how we were going to do this capacity building, we realized that, you know, what we needed was really a framework, something that could guide us, number one, to establish these EQA providers, but number two, something that we could use and provide to any country or any institution that wanted to establish EQA programs. So we've also developed, we've put all that training and all the skills that are needed into what we call the framework for implementation of EQA training and qualification package. And in there is all the requirements in terms of the training, capacity building, infrastructure capacity building that is needed to establish an EQA program. And that will be made available through ASLM and the ASLM Academy. A very big part of any EQA program is also the informatics system. I mean, it is really one of the key components of any EQA program. And one of the things that we also realized that in terms of sustainability and moving forward, we needed something which was open source, which was free, and which was customizable, especially because our aim is to build regional capacity. So not just to build the capacity of these 3 EQA providers, but to be able to provide tools and systems and that other providers can use to establish their own EQA programs. So we are proud that we have been working with our IT team and with our consultants to develop a free open source customizable or self-hosted supported or self-hosted informatics system. And I will not dwell too much on that because we're going to have another CoP session just to look at to talk about the informatics system, what we've done and what we hope to do moving forward. But just to say that we have been able to successfully complete the module for AMR, and we're currently using it to operate the EQA program, and Olga will talk more about this. I've already mentioned the community of practice, which was really key in terms of is providing that technical support, which was a gap from the participants' perspective. And so we're really using this as a forum to be able to exchange ideas, to exchange knowledge, but also to provide TA to sites. Olga will also talk about some activities that we undertake after each cycle to provide further technical assistance to sites. So just to conclude, I just want to talk about the current coverage of the program. Currently, the program is covering for our last cycle 150 labs across 14 countries. And as I said, we have a One Health approach. So we're covering both human health and animal health labs and some food safety laboratories as well. And in the selection of our providers, you can see that we're covering the majority of sub-Saharan Africa. The reason why we're currently only covering 14 countries are those are the priority countries from the Fleming Fund that we're working with, but we do hope in the future to expand the geographical coverage of this, the program, and be able to include more countries across board. And then to date, our implementation to date, and I will not, Olga will talk more about this, but we've been able to successfully complete a pilot in a cycle 1, and we're currently in the process of the implementation of cycle 2, as you can see on your screen. So with that, I would like to say thank you. Before I hand over to Professor Perovic, just to remind everybody that if you have any questions, etc., please put them in the chat box and I'll be happy to answer them afterwards. Thank you very much. Over to you, Edwin.
Thank you very much, Beatrice, and congratulations for establishing a regional EQA providers. And it's quite refreshing to hear that you already have 150 laboratories participating in this scheme. So colleagues, feel free to put your questions in the chat box. We will get to the question and answer time, and we will be responding to those questions. So without wasting much time, I want to invite our second presenter, Professor Olga Perovic, who is a principal pathologist and antimicrobial resistance program lead in South Africa, where she works with the Center for Healthcare Associated Infections, Antimicrobial Resistance and Mycosis, also known as CHAM. She is an associate professor at the University of Witwatersrand and is also the head of the WHO Collaborating Center for AMR. Olga is a member of the Ministerial Advisory Committee for AMR at the National Department of Health in South Africa. She has expertise in surveillance programs for AMR, infection control, as well as stewardship programs. She has very extensive experience in laboratory quality systems, including provision of external assessment programs for bacteriology, serology, and AMR. Professor Olga Perovic is going to take us through implementing a regional EQA program for AMR, the achievements, as well as the lessons learned from the implementation of the regional EQA program for AMR. Over to you, Professor Olga.
Thank you, and I appreciate this invitation and also attendance. I can see the number of people is really high, and interest obviously reflect the importance of this laboratory quality system. So Beatrice really explained in details how it started. I'm going to go just very on a ground level for everyone to understand more details. And I just want to ask, can you see the changes of my slide?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So it's just some background, and which I don't want to repeat, but it's worthwhile acknowledging that NICD experience in external quality assessment, but also quality management system is long standing, and this year we are celebrating 20 years of first and beginning of the production of the external quality assessment for WHO program. So in this program, there are a number of us involved, and I really want to acknowledge Marshane Smith, which is the laboratory manager and involved in the program and design and contribution also with activities that follows. I want to acknowledge Rubena Badat. She is the technologist, really great support, and also running the groundwork and preparing the program and the shipment and everything what's needed for the in the granular details. So our activity, just to explain, being involved and obviously in assessment of informatics system, because we did create some informatics system in our very close NHLS NICD program. Then we also try to become stakeholders in all activities related, involved in an assessment of the other laboratories that's supposed to contribute to this program, and also involved in a training and responsibility in pilot program, cycle 1, and now it's cycle 2. So I'm just going to go in a not that much details, but just to unwrap the process, which is very important to understand, because there's lots of logistics process in a whole the EQA running as a program. So obviously we identified the pilots, why we are looking and why we introduce a pilot is obviously to see how this is gonna move on, and with shipping and information system, I'm gonna explain shipping issues later. We obviously contributed to the design, provided information to all our consortium, because it's besides NICD, other sites, AMREF, IPD, DTU, ASLM, PHE, they all contributed to the whole program overall. Obviously, we agreed how to distribution to goes, and here we also acknowledge and how not exactly territorial, but we try to lump the laboratory that do easy to go with the shipment in that region. So Institute Pasteur in Dakar had deliver or having covered a few countries, Cameroon, Ghana, Nigeria, and Senegal. Eastern at that time in a pilot, Kenya, AMREF from Kenya, they covered Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. And NICD covered the southern region with Malawi, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. So NICD, it's because obviously it's been a site that produced physically and over that period of time. We started with the pilot. We start with the planning. We also involved the activities that are very important, and that is participation. We have to have a number of, we need to know exactly a number of laboratory. Then also confirmation of referees laboratory, because that's an essential part of the whole program. The engagement with courier systems. Then we also engage with the help of the Public Health of England. We supported those countries with quality control strains for them to perform the microscopy, culture, and sensitivity. And we also try to engage in follow the proper timeline for translation, because it's all program, every information being translated to French. And we also perform the quality control for every sample enrolled and before the shipment, duration of shipment, and obviously in a period of time of the challenge in this cycle. So and we also design program of work. So this pilot details, I'm not going to go. We had 5 challenge specimen with the clinical details, and for each of those, also for each of testing of those isolates, we provided quality control. We also been addressing the referee consensus, and really so many details. So basically, a cycle open on a 10th of May last year, 2021, and close at on the 24th of May, 2021. We also had a technical advisory group over the time, which discussed the whole issue along. And so 67 participating laboratory across those 3 sites were involved, enrolled in the pilot. So we had at that time 67 laboratories, just to obviously understand. And this is a program of work for the pilot. You can see that it's a small print, but it's nothing to indicate more than we had to have, and we addressed the importance of the deadline. So, so that is shown when it started, when it's closed, 24th, and then we also released preliminary reports on the website. So it means that every single laboratory could see what is expected or expected the results once a cycle was closed. So here we are looking at the process and how NICD follow the plan and the program of work. At the first, we had to set up the date. So all that started much in advance. So we already in a week of 23rd of March, we started to organism workups and to identify the organism, to get them running. So it's obviously takes time. And also we start with the lyophilization for those organisms and control. And we also been preparing everything to for shipment. And obviously remember that's regulated by IATA, and we look at all the details how to go around. So all the specimen, all the sample, everything was produced and shipped from NICD for a pilot study at that time. This is just to give you some understanding how important it is to communication in between all, firstly, technical advisory group, then secondly, how it's important also to communicate all the time at the right time with all parties involved. So we had also with the informatics, we had to define the number of, the final number of participants. All communication need to be sent to everyone. We also inform our referees laboratory. We provided the clinical data for human and animal. So just one very important understanding is that in this approach from the grantor, from Fleming Fund, they emphasize importance of One Health approach. So in this also situation, we try to cater our program for human, animal, and environmental sectors, so everyone could be able to engage. So we adjusted, obviously, the list of organisms, the way how we interpret, and the scenario. Obviously, the clinical scenario will not go to the animal and environmental. Then we obviously go into preparation of lyophilized samples in a way. This is just show and tell. This is how the process need to go in every single details. We used Maldi, Toff, Brooker for final identification, but we also use all other possible identification tools to understand, are there any variations? So at the end, the final organism workout is something that we confirm with multiple methods in our laboratory. The same similar situation is with AST, because we do have also variety. We do have the different automated instrument, but also Vitek and Macroscan, but also we have a Sensitither, test methods, and all that we implemented. This is just to show some shipping conditions. It's to understand the complexity. All participants have been acknowledged, and every single challenge, every single specimen was packed according to UN 3373 biological substance category B, and according obviously to commitment to deliver door to door to each participant. This is just a show and tell, because we had numerous information to participants, and everything what we explain all the steps along, so they've been informed all the way along what is required and how we expect for them to perform and to send reports. So, so I'm not going to take much time, because it is just some additional responsibilities. We also have, and I need to acknowledge that we had some delays, and especially with the deliveries because of the shipment. And we had to, for the certain participants that they haven't received our shipment timely, we had to have the extension of the reporting, which that is the reason why we had our preliminary report sent on the 1st of July. So we done evaluation once we received, and we also find that we will look at the referees' results, and more than 80% being inconsistent. And we approved, we done grading area, we look at the individual reports, and everything was discussed at the technical advisory group, and all. Then we also created a commentary or summary of the report with no identification of individual laboratory, and we sent the feedback. So this is just a number of the countries and of enrollment. I'm not going to take much more exact, just show itself. And this is overall performance in the pilot program. So you can see that 80% expected the acceptable results. And you can see for some challenge, laboratory have reached. For some challenge, they've been behind expected results. So activity from this pilot, we learned something. So after this pilot study, we had a team from IPD for the training and preparation for the cycle 1. We also covered all training requirements. So then when cycle came, we already know what to expect. We had a similar setup as previously. I'm not going to go in more details. We done the planning, but this time, and that is exactly what happened with the cycle 1. You can see the similar scenarios. IPD start preparing samples for their participants. So NICD shipped the organism, but they start producing for their list of participants, which this time has increased. So now you can see the numbers increase actually from previous 67 to 153 laboratories, IPD 53, the AMREF 54, and NICD 46. We had the program of work, and I'm going to talk about hiccups also, because you can see that cycles open in November, and the final results submission by end of November. But obviously, we already knew that it should be some additional extension to it. So there are some challenges and experienced by NICD, and that we need to address and we discuss over time. Firstly, there have been some logistics, and that is nothing new that we don't know, because we experienced that over the time. And that is delay in, firstly, some logistics, so that there are shipment permits, multiple courier needed to be engaged, because one group doesn't go to this country, another does. So it's been lots of challenges and how to engage with the whole logistics. And then, so then obviously we also needed, because of this, we had to delay some reports and submission of results and closing of cycle. And obviously that reflect and delay in grading, and obviously that report generation in circulation. So we timeline, and what you've seen in a program of work didn't exactly correlate it, but it is something that we need to work on it over time. So this is now a result from cycle 1 for 153 participants. So you can identify some challenges. For example, some almost all AST results, except for sample A, being below 80% expected acceptance. So this is now, so what we pull out, what we took actually is, we just look now in the same laboratory from pilot and cycle 1 and how they perform over time. And you can see that it's not much difference, but what we find that laboratory or sporadically done well on one group of challenge, but on another not so well. And there is some take-home message, and that firstly, we had to address the overall delays in the shipment. We tried to standardize all the scheme generation, grading, reporting, And obviously we need to do some planning to avoid festival seasons, for example, some holidays and other, because we definitely seen in December lots of delays during the reason, obviously festival season. With that, I really want to thank you for your attention and to happy to answer any question, and everything is transparent, and always all of us happy to give all information needed. Over to you, and Edwin, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Olga, for that very insightful presentations. I see a lot of questions coming on the chat box, so we'll go straight into our question and answer session. So our first question comes from Dawit Asefa from Ethiopia. Greetings in Ethiopia there. So the question says, are those providers ISO 17043 accredited? If so, that is great, because most of the labs are on track for ISO 15189 accreditation. So I think this is for Beatrice. And the second question says, formally this program plan to procure some microbiology supply as well as EQA establishment. What is the status of this? So I'll invite Beatrice to react to that.
Thank you very much, Edwin. So, my apologies, put my camera. So let me address the first question, which was about the accreditation. So two of other facilities we're working with, AMREF Health and NICD. Well, AMREF Health is 17043 accredited. NICD is also accredited, but not 17043. But I would like to remind participants that it is an accredited facility. NICD is already an accredited facility and used to run the whole bacteriology program for NHLS. So they had previous 17043 accreditation, but when the program was moved to the quality assurance unit, the accreditation kind of went with them. But NICD is a very experienced provider. We're currently working with IPD. We have technical experts on the ground and with our consortium to get them also 17043 accredited. So we're moving forward with that process. As you know, there is some work and timelines involved in getting a lab accredited. And so we didn't want to wait for that to happen before we established the program. We're doing both in parallel. And then the second question was in relation, could you remind me of the second question, please, Edwin?
Sure. So it spoke to the issues of procurement for the microbiology reagents, to say what is the status, where are we?
Okay, so across the countries that we're working with, the majority of you are Fleming Fund priority countries. And so the assistance that we're giving to national reference labs and surveillance sites is mostly technical for now. The infrastructure capacity building in terms of the provision of reagents, supplies, equipment for microbiology testing was being done through the country grants and through the country grant partners. Now, we hope that moving forward, we can do a bit of infrastructure capacity building, especially where it relates to the work we're doing on the ground with the establishment of quality management systems and to address those gaps. In terms of reagents and supplies, generally for bacteriology, that is not within the scope of what we're currently doing. That may change, but currently not in the scope.
Thank you very much, Beatrice, for that. Our next question, I think this is directed to Prof. Olga. If you can speak to the issues around reports for the last panel that was shared. We have a question from William Senyonga. Unfortunately, they did not indicate the country. So maybe you can just speak generally in terms of the final reports for the last EQA panel that we shared, Prof. Olga.
Right. As you can see from our report and summary report, this is overall. So we cannot even with accreditation, you can only do some summary reports where it's description of issue and guide the laboratory overall how to perform. So from this, we find that it's a depends of which organism we are putting in a challenge, and also antimicrobial susceptibility testing for organism that we ask for. So so overall, our assessment is that laboratories in general are having difficulties with AST or guidelines. Is it the CLSI or UCAS guidelines? Actually, majority of laboratory are using CLSI guidelines. And we also find that some of laboratory do have a updates version. Some of laboratory are behind. And using any of those, or not actually, or mixing and matching different guidelines and using one to interpret and to perform, it might actually be some of the reasons why performance is really not up to the standard. 80% acceptable is according to the quality management system that should actually allow a laboratory to fluctuate in giving the reports. If you translate that in the everyday reports to the clinical guidance to clinician, it means that 80% we are expecting that 80% of our reports from laboratory should correlate with the final outcome. It means with the organism, with the direction for testing and reporting to clinician. Below that, it is substandard. So if you report and say, I'm able to identify 55% or that group of laboratory, it fluctuates obviously, it is really substandard, because I am giving reports which might be or might not be correlating with real expectations. So that is where we, how we address our finding, and how we try to put in a commentary, and we try to guide in general laboratories and try to see how we can troubleshoot. From our commentary, we identified all issues. We tried to generalize troubleshooting, but we also open for individual questions and comments. So laboratory have been informed, and on the specific individual report, there are some highlights that they could actually follow and apply accordingly. So I will stop here. So just to hope that that is explanation that understood where we are going. Over.
Thank you, Prof. Let's move on to the next question from Raina Nguyema, who says, what are the conditions that a lab should fulfill to be an EQA provider? And are there technical support in terms of material and reagents for the laboratories? So I think we'll direct this to Beatrice.
So the criteria currently is that, number one, I already said in my presentation that we're working with 14 priority countries currently. Now in the future, we hope to be able to expand that scope, but currently 14 priority countries. Across those countries, we're working with the national reference laboratories for AMR and their surveillance sites. So that is currently the criteria, and the nomination of those labs is done by the country, by the MOH and by their AMR CCs. Now, in relation to provision of supplies and reagents for them to be able to carry out the test, part of the process of determining quality is also to look at capacity to be able to do the work that you're doing. I think that if we were implementing an EQA program and simultaneously providing reagents and supplies where they were needed to be able to get the testing done, we might be biasing the results that we're seeing. EQA just doesn't look at whether you can get the right or the wrong result. It also looks at the entirety of your systems, whether everything is in place for you to conduct that test. So if you are not able to do the EQA panels because you don't have reagents and supplies, that speaks generally to the reagents and supplies for your daily routine activities. And that is also part of what we are assessing, is your capacity. And it's very important because at the regional level, we can gather all this information and be able to share it with national, the MOH, with the AMR CCs, so that they can look at where the gaps are and they can support that. It's not, in a program, when we take that route, it becomes non-sustainable, because when the program ends, then who is going to provide you with those supplies and reagents? So we're staying away from that as much as possible, although we do acknowledge that it is an issue.
Thank you, Beatrice. We have a question from Edith Chege, who says, how do you address a result that disagrees with the expected result from the EQA service provider? E.g., an AST result run with BD Phoenix MD50 producing intermediate while the provider's result is susceptible. So maybe Prof. Olga, you can attempt this one.
Right. Well, this is something that we try over time to address, and that is challenge that we're having with bacteriology. And we know there is no ideal automated system that can give 100% results, either for patient, either for EQA. So obviously I'm always referring to the patient level. So that is where the expertise, training, knowledge of technologies or technology or the personnel in laboratory comes into equation. So it means that in the instrument, it's always said how, what is a probability for interpretation, either identification. If AST is not actually defined, they're gonna give some variation. And in that case, the site or laboratory need to repeat specimen. So that is a normal process. EQA doesn't do nothing differently than testing normal routine process in laboratory, what you would do. So basically that EQA now we are coming, that EQA now results. Obviously, as a provider, we need to be very certain that our AST is tested, correlated with our referees laboratory, and based on that we can assure that we are quite confident in our description. So if that doesn't correlate with the individual laboratory, we do acknowledge the reasons and what they should actually look and how they should troubleshoot those results. So that is my answer. So if you find that there is not correlation, then you need to troubleshoot in your laboratory to understand why this is happening. And then you're gonna unwrap and find that the reason is maybe didn't look at the reporting from the automated system, can be any of you. We know, for example, with a certain instrument that they are even in instruction and in evaluations of each instrument, there are some shortcomings, and that is already addressed by manufacturer. So that is all what need to be counted for. Over.
Great, thank you so much, Prof, for that comprehensive response. In closing, we just want to acknowledge Patrick Katemangwe, who says the EQA program is outstanding. Thank you so much for that comment. You had your question regarding how we address the priority organisms between animal and human health. Quickly, Prof, in like 30 seconds, how do we address that difference where human health and animal health have different priority pathogens?
Well, that is as a technical advisory group and someone that we are looking at the program overall. We scrutinize the pathogens that gonna go, which know that it's predominant in a human and animal, and there is always some the denominator that we can find the same in a bigger scope. So all of those in environmental, you can find all of those. So basically, we're not going to do specifics. For example, we're not going to do all the pathogens that are only human related, but obviously we're going to have that scope in our design, having always thinking about how transparent it is amongst all those sectors. Over.
Great, thank you so much, Prof. We've run out of time. Keep the questions. We are going to be responding to them in other forum. Thank you so much, colleagues, for joining this. So Beatrice, in 30 seconds, your parting words before we close.
Just to say thank you for everybody for joining us on this call. Remember that we have our AMR CoP platforms on WhatsApp. So if you have any questions here that couldn't be answered, please post them on that forum and we can continue the discussion, as Edwin rightly said. If you do, please also, there was a Google Forms link that was put in the chat box. Fill out that form if you're currently not on any of the platforms, or you also want to join our mailing list, and we can include you as well. But we look forward to our next session. We'll be coming up in the next 2 weeks, where we will delve further into the informatics system that we've developed. And in the meantime, I wish everybody a good day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. Thank you very much, Prof, for this very exciting session. And thank you very much, colleagues, for joining this section. We look forward to having you in our next session, as Beatrice indicated, a very exciting session on informatics. So with that, colleagues, watch out the space. You will be receiving notifications of our next AMR CoP. Have a great day, all of you, and bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.